Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. I guess we'll go ahead and get started, at least provisionally. Technically, I'm going to cross my fingers. We'll go ahead and get started. And I'm recognizing I have a technical snafu because I'm realizing I'm looking at the screen. I should be looking up at the camera. Just so people are clear, this is thankfully John Kane is here. So if we run into big problems, he will save us. But so people know I'm still sort of juggling the technology here. Let me go ahead and begin. I'll share a screen and just welcome people. I'm Michael Murphy. I am the coordinator of the Writing Across the Curriculum program. I have been for a while. I am very grateful for that people have been able to attend at the beginning of the summer. I know it's like, I know I'm tempted to get away, and I appreciate that people are here. This semester, Writing Across the Curriculum really worked hard, talked for a long time about rethinking its assessment policy. And I think that the assessment policy that went into effect in 2016 hasn't worked particularly well for a couple of kind of good reasons. In some ways, I think it's been out of the kind of loop of the cycle of departmental assessment, for one thing. And I think it's asked a lot of faculty members and departments. So we wanted to be sure we didn't make the same mistake again. We wanted to talk to people in departments, department chairs, and other folks on campus. I know some members of the task force on assessment are here. And so again, we really wanted to kind of get some feedback. This is, and the other thing I guess I want to say at the beginning here is that this is very much in process. I'll show you the draft, and I want to emphasize draft of a proposal kind of being thought through at the level of the committee, but the committee has not reached any kind of consensus. We thought this would be a good moment to sort of pull in faculty from around campus, and again, especially department chairs. So let me go ahead and offer just a little bit of history here at the beginning, and mainly what I'll kind of want to do is listen to people's thoughts. But again, let me just frame this a little bit for us at the beginning. When Writing Across the Curriculum here at Oswego was founded in 1998 by the Writing Across the Curriculum guidelines, which were passed by faculty assembly, included, I guess I wanted to say at the beginning, that assessment is part of our kind of standing charge, included this charge for assessment, which I think was in some ways preceded the general sort of discussion of assessment on campus in lots of ways. I think that came at least a little bit later than 1998 typically. So again, this was a part, I think, of what Writing Across Curriculum was supposed to do from the very beginning. And the language of that charge is in this section on assessment. In order for the writing component of general education, I'm sorry, in order to read, I have to move my gallery here. In order for the writing component of general education to be effective, periodic and regular assessment will be necessary. This assessment should be a longitudinal college-wide assessment. So again, this is sort of built into some of to the mission of Writing Across the Curriculum from the beginning. I will say I was not here for at least I was not involved at the founding of Writing Across the Curriculum. I was involved though when the Writing Across the Curriculum Steering Committee was established, or really reestablished. There was a steering committee that put together those original guidelines, but then there was no sort of like governing body or moving sort of agency involved in Writing Across the Curriculum until, I don't know, something like 2005, when the steering committee was reassembled and eventually made permanent. And I will say that the committee has always sort of felt about this charge a few kind of basic things. First, that the assessment of writing should really be located in disciplines. That is, that faculty members teaching in disciplines really are the experts on the discourse in it. I know that when I get papers from physics, for example, that win the Dean's Writing Awards, I can't tell. I can tell that they're neat and tidy, but I can't tell that they're good papers. Faculty members in disciplines are the real experts on the writing done there. Nobody has ever wanted there to be a sort of centralized kind of review of writing on campus and the Writing Across the Curriculum program. Again, we always felt like this, it was really important that this be done in disciplines by people teaching the courses. We also felt, though, there was a good deal of disagreement about what assessment should involve, and we always kind of from the beginning were very cognizant of the sort of burden involved on faculty. I'll also say that we felt like there were a couple of things that writing across the curriculum assessment as a kind of baseline could accomplish. First of all, when that committee was, again, sort of reassembled in the mid-2000s, there was some talk about things that we'd heard on campus about the requirement writing across the curriculum requirement being nominal in some places. That is that not all writing across curriculum writing plan courses necessarily included writing. We thought that, you know, part of assessment ought to be as a fundamental baseline. We ought to be sure that writing did indeed get done in writing plan courses, and in some ways it matched the kind of writing that departments imagined in their writing plans would be included. It also, I remember saying sort of adamantly that if we could simply get faculty every few years to come together and have some serious discussion of their students' writing in some kind of assessment process, that would be a tremendous sort of accomplishment. That the fundamentals kind of goal for me seemed felt to me like a moment for faculty to reflect together with colleagues seriously about students' writing. So those are the things I think that we felt like we wanted to accomplish. Though, again, this was not necessarily part of our, I guess I did not say that clearly. When the committee was reassembled again, mid-2000s, this was not the charge that the piece of the guidelines that we took up most squarely. We were really interested in being facilitators kind of writing. So I'm thinking about workshops that could be set up, establishing programs like the Dean's Writing Awards. Again, I think we thought of ourselves as sort of facilitators, people who would develop the kind of culture of writing, academic writing on campus. In something like 2012, 2013, we were reminded by the provost, then the provost, about this charge to do assessment as part of kind of the work of writing across curriculum. And we're charged specifically with developing an assessment policy. Those discussions we took a while, we chewed on it for a bit, and those discussions led to a policy that was passed in 2016, maybe spring 2016, through faculty assembly. And the basic features were these. That is that the assessment process was tied loosely in some way to the self-study cycle in departments. That is, once between each self-study, departments were supposed to do an assessment of their students' writing. And it was supposed to, the assessment reports are supposed to be embedded, it's a piece of the language in departmental self-studies. It was also this model for assessment was also built in a really general way on the gen ed sort of model of reading and ranking, and a sort of on the basis particularly of a random sample of papers pulled ideally from some like capstone writing seminar. That's the way that we had imagined it. It would also involve a scan, some kind of inventory of syllabi, just to make sure that writing plan courses included the sorts of writing assignments and opportunities that the plan described. The first three features here particularly are the ones I think that were somewhat difficult. I think departments were always, no matter what kind of prodding and reminders we might offer, departments were, it was difficult to remember that this assessment needed to be done somewhere in that 5-year cycle. And two, I think it was somewhat awkward in terms of the location of those assessment reports in self-studies. Departments have tons of stuff to do with self-studies. And I think the language of this kind of assessment tends to be and ought to be different from the language of self-studies. And if there's something, I think a good assessment report is in some way sort of unguarded, that it's a moment to kind of reflect on the work done in your department, which is a different, I think the goal is different from the rhetorical goal of self-studies. And two, again, I think this kind of reading and ranking, where this was like an independent project that departments would have to take up somewhere in that 5-year cycle, right? That reading and ranking project was a significant demand, a significant ask, I think, for departments to take up. So anyway, those are the issues that seemed most the biggest problem kind of in assessment, at least to my mind. This is the 2016 policy, or from the 2016 policy. I won't go through it slowly, but you can see here I've put in, I've highlighted the moments where those requirements are present, right? The sense that there would be some attention to the percentages of student work meeting and exceeding faculty expectations. The estimate, like I said, of how many writing plan courses in the major meet the writing requirements articulated in the departmental programs writing plan. And then also that these reflections would be folded into the writing plan. That this would be a moment kind of for the review of writing plans. Into, you can see the kind of data collection project. We said when we did this that we wanted departments to be able to use data student writing that they had collected for some other assessment, right? That you could sort of double dip in some way, that would be a really efficient way to do this. But again, that required some kind of planning. I think departments had trouble getting that done. So I also want now to describe what I'll emphasize is a policy under discussion. That is, I do not come to present to you some finished work of the Writing Across the Curriculum Committee. This is in fact, I want to acknowledge and make clear that there's been some division in the Writing Across the Curriculum Steering Committee about assessment and particularly about the demands that it places on faculty. We have three members, I think, who were also on the task force on assessment last year, that concluded last year, and who have rightly reminded us of the sort of burden assessment projects place on faculty, the number of things that faculty and departments need to get done administratively. So we've tried really hard. I think this was our intention from the beginning, but I'll say I think we've worked doubly hard to think about ways that we could do this as simply and in as unburdensome a way as possible. And again, this is still very much in process. It seemed like this was a moment to try to expand where it would be good to try to expand the discussion and involve people on campus. So anyway, I'll say we considered a few models. The one that I think it's fair to say probably has gotten the most traction is a model that would involve integrate the assessment of upper division expository writing. That was the charge originally from the provost in 2012, into the cycle of learning outcome assessment, the normal assessment that departments carry out each year, right, of learning outcomes. Choose one each year, right, and think about it, right. In fact, this was something we considered back in the day too, back at the sort of the first time through this process. But if departments declared writing or understood writing as one of the learning outcomes, as I'm told at least that most departments in liberal arts and sciences actually do already, right? Then this work could be folded into the sort of natural cycle. That's kind of what we were shooting for, folded into the natural cycle of departmental assessment. We would also recommend, as opposed to at least in this model, the discussion's been a recommendation for what we talk about as embedded assessment. When we did the English 102 assessment last calendar year, is that right, Ken? Last calendar. Yes. It's hard to remember, particularly with pandemic, and the visual imprint is like Zoom faces, so I have trouble distinguishing when things got done, I guess. But when we did the English 102 assessment for Gen Ed, we did what the last assessment coordinator was recommending as embedded assessment. That is, faculty members read and ranked as they graded, read and ranked their own student writing, which we found really, really simple to do. In fact, we found it much more efficient, not only efficient, but accurate. We had a much better sense of how well our students revised, for example, than we did as we read 2 or even 3 drafts of a paper in a group. That is of collected data. We came together then with those rankings, but you know, really prepared to have a kind of discussion based on the stuff that we'd already read for other students. Again, I think those were really productive discussions, and something we thought that would make it relatively easy for faculty members, much easier than sort of pulling papers, right? Reading them in a group. We used to read for English 1 to 2. We used to read 200, 220 4 or 5 paper portfolios, you know, across like a week and a half. It was exhausting. And this took much less time. So anyway, it's a feature that we thought could be built into this model usefully. It would also, just like the last assessment policy, involve some kind of a scan of syllabi to make sure that writing plan courses included the sorts of writing assignments and opportunities that the plan described. That is, when I did it for English, because I did this for the last time that we assessed writing, basically I pulled, because we have lots of courses that count as writing plan courses, I pulled a 20% random sample using that same sort of gen ed student formula. And it quickly became apparent, right? It took me, I don't know, an hour, maybe an hour and a half to scan those syllabi and think about the opportunities for writing. I could talk about that quite conclusively and concretely on the basis of that kind of scan. So anyway, this is the language of the draft. Again, I want to emphasize the draft. If I had been able to put a watermark on slides, I would have draft of a policy sort of under discussion. We were looking for some thoughts about. We would again assess advanced expository writing as part of the regular assessment of learning outcomes, as many departments and programs with learning outcomes connected to writing already do. In departments where writing is not now included in learning outcomes, writing could either be added to one of the existing outcomes or added independently as a new outcome. I have ideas about how that could be done. I think it could be done relatively simply by saying something like students will, by referring to the writing plan, right? Students will exit with some grasp of the genres and features and habits of mind specified in the department's writing plan. So it would not involve the creation of significant new language and negotiation of significant new language. And then at Murat Yasser's suggestion, we could also make provisions for departments that did not want to. This is the reason we didn't adopt this plan back in 2012, 2016. We worried that there were departments that would resist making writing one of their learning outcomes. And so, you know, as a feature of this plan, we'd imagined that departments would have that as an option, but would still need to sort of assess writing at some point in that 5-year cycle. You can see the recommendation for the embedded assessment process, and along with this sort of syllabi audit. So anyway, I think I've gone on longer than I intended to. So my questions really, I guess, again, what I really imagined for this session was to kind of listen, to be able to, I know some members of the WAC steering committee are here, but to be able to report back to them discussion. I guess our questions are, does this seem like this is the closest I think that we've come to being able to propose something? Does this seem like a manageable policy? You know, do you have a sense? Not only is it workable, will this be like a meaningful kind of policy? I have always felt like what faculty around campus resent most about assessment is the sort of like busy work aspect. Like, I think that faculty tend not to resist obligations, administrative obligations that seem meaningful in some way, right? But when they feel like busy work, I think people really don't want to. I think people do rightly resist them. So we don't want a sort of a busy work policy. Does this seem like it would be meaningful? And do you have suggestions, again, about a more useful way to sort of imagine this policy on the basis of your experience with assessment and administrative work, right? Do you have are there other models that we should be thinking about? So, those are my questions. Thoughts or?
I'll start. My thought is, I put it in the chat. I think I'm the only member of my department who actually knows we have an official writing plan on file. And I think for example, my harping on lab report writing and things like that, people think it's just me. They don't know that it's actually part of the college curriculum, and it's something we really have to be doing.
Okay.
So-
So, and it's your sense that assessment might make people more aware of, okay, that's great. Other thoughts? Are there other things, again, that we should be thinking about? Are there other models or the things that you know, I guess, again, you can get a sense, if not of this as a specific sort of policy proposal, you can get a sense of the drift of discussions and sort of the things that have been a concern for us. So the other things that should be on the table for writing across the curriculum as we develop this policy, based on your experience. Maybe I'll stop sharing here so we can.
I guess I'm curious, Mike, as to whether the embedded assessment that we did, I thought was extremely valuable, but also very efficient, and very, it was worthwhile without adding a lot of labor and a lot of all of that. I am curious as to how that does help or would help other disciplines, because I only know from the English side.
How the process of embedding?
Yeah, having embedded assessment, because it'll be slightly different in each discipline. So I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that, how if they've done it or what they might think.
Let me just, I know, because I know this is an awkward and difficult hybrid situation. This is Ken Nichols, who I think you cannot see him from the English department, who's one of the writing fellows, a writing fellow for Schema. As one of the English 102 instructors, because this was a totally inclusive kind of assessment project, participated. That is in you know what we've both been calling embedded assessment. That is, Ken came having ranked some random sample of students from his own English 102s, his own sections of 102, as I did too. So that when we got done with grades, I myself didn't do it until the end. I could think about all of their work, not just the work that had been pulled. We used to pull three papers, to a draft, a revision, and then a research piece. And then we'd also sometimes get some other stuff too. And so we didn't do that. And when we would all read it together, right, as a group, that is, it would be, portfolios would be double read, and they'd go to a third adjudicator if there was some disagreement about rankings. So we went through the double blind process. It involved a lot of reading. It took us probably, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 work days in the spring. This took us, an hour and a half at the end of each semester when we did this. And then it took me a little while to write the report. So Ken's question is, my assumption is that would be really useful that's a model that would be really useful for departments around campus. And so I think Ken's asking, is that the case? That is, would that kind of embedded assessment process save the same sort of labor, I'm assuming that that's true, that it did for us in English 102?
And most importantly, encourage a good discussion of common needs and concerns in the department.
Because yes, I'll say one other advantage, which Ken's rightly pointing out, is that when we did the old assessment process, when we did that double blind reading of portfolios, it involved like 8 people in a room. This involved every instructor in English 102 in each semester. So it was quite inclusive and made for a really general and I think robust kind of discussion. So are there thoughts about that? Is this a good model? Is this something that we should include and recommend?
So even though I'm very involved with writing and assessment, I've not seen this policy. I'm only interim chair as of this semester. But I do know that our courses that are part of the writing plan, many of them have a high number of adjuncts teaching them. And in the case of student teaching or curriculum and instruction, with the exception of me and one other person, the other 20-some people who evaluate the writing of our candidates are all adjunct supervisors. So a few things are striking me. One is, you know, we talk about at the end of the semester getting people together. Well, adjunct faculty contracts are done.
Right.
And what does this mean for, is kind of like what I did with NTPA, you know, all the inter-rater reliability, is there like a whole nother level of preparing people to evaluate the writing on top of everything else that they're evaluating. So I guess, and I'm just thinking out loud, what does this mean if these are the courses, or should we be looking at different courses to serve the writing plan? Or is the assessment not just of the courses in the writing plan that's being proposed? So I'm just throwing a lot of thoughts out there.
Okay, and let me try to answer. There are a few things that you mentioned that I'll try to go back and if I can recall each of them.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. The one thing is just that in School of Ed, you have NCAPE. So there's,
Okay,
writing assessment that is in School of Ed, School of Business, and in certain schema departments where there's a professional accreditation review. We made arrangements for writing assessment to be done through those kinds of reviews. And so I think Nicole Wise I saw was here, yes. And so anyway, as we've been thinking about reestablishing some other policy, right? Again, we've thought about rethinking that too, but that's in large part why this may seem a little unfamiliar. Second thing, about adjuncts. In English 102, though, this is changing at least a little bit. We have a long history sort of with involving adjuncts, and I'll say that it is really complicated. When we did, because of the nature of the size of the project, again, we were reviewing something at the beginning like 220 multi-paper portfolios. It's going to take a week and a half. There was a stipend involved. Part of the reason we went to embedded assessment first was that that stipend, the possibility of the stipend went away. But again, I think it's become an alternative that most folks have found manageable. Again, at least in English, where we do still have some number of adjuncts. Those adjuncts did not, I don't want to ask for any kind of extra sort of commitment, but this again felt like a single meeting could be done even in the kind of final work of class. Felt like a relatively kind of minimal sort of commitment. So we found that manageable, though I totally appreciate it, and I think it's something that departments, schools should think about, probably think hard about in terms of how to focus on an assessment project. In some ways, it was unavoidable for us adjuncts to do a certain amount of the teaching.
I mean, we do a tremendous amount of assessment. It's just not always, and writing is involved.
Right.
But I don't, and I'll learn more. I'll talk to Nicole about how specifically we're looking at writing assessment.
Yeah, and I think certainly, again, I think very likely you guys already do some version of writing assessment. Where writing is a major feature of the sort of assessment. Other thing I was going to say about norming. Again, I did not mention that, but you're right. There was typically a pre-semester meeting where we did some kind of norming. And I always think that norming is at least as much about having healthy norming is at least as much about understanding our differences as readers as it is about putting ourselves on the same page exactly. But there was that pre-study meeting in addition to the meeting afterwards.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? I don't know if people could hear the question.
I'll ask a question. So historically, like what sort of impact, like when you look at the assessment data and you've made changes, like what sort of changes, at what level are you looking to make changes? Is it very foundational, or are people looking at courses and saying, I need to change this assignment because people aren't responding the way I thought? Or is it like, we have to add another course before this, it introduces writing? So like, what is kind of the, if it were perfect, what would it really be informing?
If it were perfect, I think it would be all of those things, Marianne. Honestly, given my experience with the English department, not just in English 102, but with the writing plan in English, which we have revised and thought about kind of carefully, it's has come as those revisions have come, honestly, as the result of assessment studies. Right? As we did some kind of study and reflected, met as a group and reflected about on its results. Yes, we did change so that for in a really simple as a really simple example, we added a course that was sort of a professional writing practical, which had not been a piece of the writing done in the English department at all before that. But we added a course called Words in the World, which allowed students some opportunity to take the rhetorical skills they developed as English majors and apply them to some real world context. We also have recently, within the last couple of years, added English 391, a writing portfolio course that emphasizes revision, right? Out of this sense that students were not following through on projects and revising carefully. So those are a couple of examples at the departmental level. And so for me, where that where the rubber would really meet the road on that is sort of in a revision of the writing plan. I think this would be a moment for departments to, just as you've suggested, Ian, come back and sort of reflect on what they've said, told themselves and told students, right, they would do with writing, so that yes, there'd be changes maybe in the plan and not just in the sequence of courses, which is typical, that's what departments usually want to revise, but maybe too in the language of the plans, right? These are the goals, right? The things that we want our student writers to be able to do. Maybe we should rethink that, right? For English, part of it was to broaden the sense of application and rhetorical skills. Does that make sense?
And I'll say this is kind of, again, I'll say, Marianne, from my perspective as an instructor, I deeply enjoyed hearing what all of my colleagues were going through, to compare my own experience in terms of whatever concerns we're facing or whatever, common mistakes we're finding, even especially after COVID, the common kind of like feeling of the classroom, the feeling of the students. So it was really useful to have a low effort discussion of those issues, just to inform ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think lots of people, and I know that it's true for me too, make changes in pedagogy, syllabi, assignments, and the way that we conduct classes, the way we do workshop, for example, in class, on the basis of those kind of conversations. So yes, I think it does have that effect, even when not so sort of tangibly in a document, as when there's a change to a writing plan.
Sometimes I feel like bringing our department writing plan to the attention of my colleagues may make my life more complicated by opening a can of worms that I don't want to. But I think for us in physics, funny you used physics as an example earlier, because the pedagogy in the introductory laboratories is sort of moving away from making it a writing course, and doing other conceptual and experimental proficiency initiatives. That means we're going to have to be looking for possibly something else in the other courses that we offer that to be officially writing courses, but I don't dare bring this up.
The suggestion of adding a course, I'm pretty sure that in some programs that will be impossible. We had some other issues in math programs where we considered adding a course and we found out that we can't.
I have a question for you, Magdalena. And actually to anybody who might answer this, do writing courses that say we specify in physics, we specify all those intro lab sections as being writing plan courses for our majors, do they get specified or could they get specified for, say, your math majors? And vice versa, you know, do writing plan courses in other departments, if you make them a required cognate, can they count towards the writing plan?
I think I can answer that question. They don't, unless there are provisions made. You know what I mean? That is, if in economics, for example, right, there are writing courses that are taught by business. You can farm out a writing course to another department, right? You have to make it part of the major, but no, it's not as if taking a writing intensive course in a different discipline counts as one of the 5.
But what
Supposed
if
to be
it's,
writing in the discipline, right? So
yeah, but what if it's already part of a cognate requirement for your discipline, right? I mean, physics and math, for example, being so tied together and taking each other's courses.
Yes, that's I think that's something that your department might well take advantage of. Yes, I think that's true. Though again, that's a potential change, you know, that could be made in the writing plan. So if you have ideas about that, and let me know. You know, we could.
Well, I mean, specifically, you know, all the STEM disciplines that are required to take physics are taking the year of introductory physics, and they're nominally writing lab reports every week, or at least 2 formal reports a semester. It's listed, all the expectations are listed in the physics writing plan. So would that be important for us to then continue so that other departments can list that as one of their writing courses and recognize that their students are getting embedded writing in these cognates? So, or for example, I often recommend for some of my students to go take the technical writing course at Tech Ed, but it's in no way counting towards us. I'd love to make it a degree requirement or something like that. Would that interdepartmental cooperation actually help everybody?
To my mind, as Magdalena points out, if those courses, like especially the professional writing course, the technical writing course, would seem germane to work in the major, if it was connected to writing in the discipline, I think you'd have a good argument for making that part of the plan. I was just looking around the screen to make sure that Chris Lalonde wasn't here. I'll refer you to him. General education actually is where the additions to the changes to the courses that count in the plan are approved. And so we should talk to Chris, but I think that's a good and sensible argument. Are there other thoughts or issues? Does the plan that I've laid out here, again, I want to be, that's not a plan that we're moving forward. I wonder though, does that seem reasonable to most folks who are here? Thoughts about that?
my thought is that not very many department chairs showed up today.
Yeah.
Perhaps this should be discussed at the chairs meetings.
Yeah.
Or just through solicit feedback through some sort of a Google form.
Right. Yeah, well, I've tried to solicit feedback through email, but a Google form is a good suggestion. And yes, maybe I wanted to come to a liberal arts and sciences leadership meeting, at least this spring, but I was teaching when the meetings took place. But yes, I think it'd be a useful thing to do for the fall. Okay. And are there any other messages I should bring back to writing across the curriculum? Okay, I guess then I will adjourn us if there's no other discussion or comments. I'll adjourn us and thank you again for coming. Again, Magdalena, we will continue to sort of have contact with there's program directors. So, thank you very much.
If you could just stop the recording. Yep.